Welcome. So the goal of the Omni-Win project is to help accelerate the co-creation of the future of democracy. And one of the things we're going to need is some collaborative communication skills. Today, I'm going to dig deeply into what is called interest-based conflict resolution and what it would look like for us to create an interest-based political culture. I'm going to start us off with a quote from Mary Parker Follett. This is from her book called The New State. She says there are three ways of dealing with difference: domination, compromise, and integration. And by domination, only one side gets what it wants. By compromise, neither side gets what it wants. And by integration, we find a way by which both sides may get what they wish. Again, that one is from Mary Parker Follett. When I hear that, I immediately thought of a tool that we use in the world of conflict that's called the Thomas Killman Conflict Resolution Styles Model. The model is based off of a basic Y and X axis. And on the Y axis is basically measuring how important it is, how important your own agenda is. Basically, how much do you care about getting what you want? And then on the X axis is a spectrum measuring how much we value the relationship. And so when we look at this, there's different ways that we might respond to a conflict in different kinds of situations. And honestly, each of these makes sense in certain contexts. So let me talk about what that looks like. In the top left corner, you have the need to basically get what you want is very important, but the relationship is of low importance. In that situation, the best conflict style or approach might be to compete with the other person. Basically, just try to win. Get what you want at any cost. This works really well if you don't care about the long-term relationship and if you're only looking for a short-term solution. And that's important because you're only going to get a short-term solution because the other person might come back or the other group might come back and fight you again. So by not including them now, you might have to deal with them later. But if you just need a short-term solution, you don't care about the relationship, competing can be a fine strategy. Now, on the other far extreme, we have the need for really caring about the relationship, but not really caring that much about what you want. In that situation, the best way of acting is accommodating. That's basically let the other person have what they need. Accommodation can be really great if you have a long-term relationship and that's what's most important. And you can be okay with not getting whatever it is that your agenda was. Now, in the bottom corner over here, where you don't care about your agenda and you don't care about the relationship, you can just avoid the conflict. You don't need to talk to the other person. You don't have to ask for what you want. You're not going to get it if you don't ask for it. But also, you're not going to be in relationship with this person either because you're not engaging with them about the things that are important to you. Now, oftentimes, we think about compromise. Now, compromise kind of comes right in the middle of this whole situation. Compromise, as Mary Parker Follett says, is no one really gets what they want. But let's just say everyone kind of gets some of what they want. Now, this can be useful in situations where you're just trying to have a short-term, some things are just transactional. And those work great for just things that are transactional. If there's truly a choice and there are mutually exclusive possibilities or needs, then this can be fine because you're just going to figure out what's kind of the halfway point. I think an example of this, let's say we're trying to decide what movie we want to go to. The compromise would be picking a movie that both people are kind of into, but neither person's really watching the movie that they really want to see. Now, collaboration is what's up here. And this is what's valuable when you care about your agenda and you care about the relationship. Now, collaboration is kind of this magical place where everyone is getting what they want. both sides can get what they wish. Now, in order to do this, you're going to have to engage with the other side. And we have tools and dialogue and mediation that make this totally possible. It takes a little bit more time up front, but then you get that long-term output. Now, collaboration is valuable when there are issues that will benefit from having multiple perspectives, when the relationship is going to be ongoing, and you're looking for a long-term sustainable solution. When it comes to our politics, that's the kind of conversations that we need to have. For most of the political conflicts that we have right now, we all are going to continue being in a relationship. They are complex. We need lots of different perspectives on them. And we need outcomes and solutions that really can be durable. And what's more is that once you've learned how to collaborate, then you know how to continue collaborating and you can keep on improving it. Some of these issues will keep on evolving for various reasons. So how do we do this collaboration thing? I'm going to start by just talking a little bit of what the secret or essence of what mediation and dialogue is. Really what we're doing is we're surfacing what are the underlying interests, the underlying needs. We often use a model with an iceberg, and we talk about we're usually conflicting about or in conflict about the stuff that's above the surface, which is the strategies or the positions that people are taking. Maybe in the political context, it would be like the policy that we're fighting over, like the specific language. But behind all of that is actually trying to meet some need and meet some interest. And what we find in our field is by talking about those underlying needs and interests and surfacing them and recognizing like what is really going on, oftentimes we can find strategies, or most of the time, vastly most of the time, we can find strategies that can meet everyone's needs and interests. Now, that, however, requires that we actually need to care about each other's interests and so forth. But let me tell you about this, how we got here to this idea that we call interest-based conflict resolution. And if we go through history, and this is a concept that I'm pretty sure was developed by Fisher and Urey, but it's been talked about for a long time, and I've learned about this through my mentor, Kenneth Cloke. There are three ways we can resolve conflict. We can resolve conflict a power-based approach, we can take a rights-based approach, or we can take an interest-based approach. Now, the power-based approach is the oldest and sometimes the most familiar way of ever dealing with conflict. And the way that we do that is whoever has the most power is the person who wins. And this is why we use violence to resolve conflict. If someone can knock you out, then you win. Or if you can cause enough harm to someone, then they'll maybe just say, okay, whatever you want. Now, we also, of course, have power in our political situations. And oftentimes what is happening is, whether it's through protest or trying to win elections or various things, is trying to figure out, let's get the person in power that we want, or let's try to elevate our cause, or let's try to cause enough pain the other person might pay attention to us. So power-based is certainly effective, but we can see that this is kind of in that competing category that we were talking about before. And one of the things with power-based approach is that it's a win-lose process. And you can win as long as you keep power. But once you don't have power anymore, then you're going to be on the losing side. So it's not, necessarily the most satisfying way of resolving conflict. The second way of resolving conflict is called a rights-based approach. Now, this is why we have laws in our society. This is an amazing technology that we've created for ourselves. An idea of rights is we can create one set of rules that will apply to everyone, no matter how much power they have. There are, however, a couple disadvantages of taking a rights based approach to resolving our political conflict. First of all, oftentimes the laws are written by people in power. And another thing, especially in our legal system, something I spoke about before, is our rights-based, our laws, our legislation is not actually representing the people. The representatives don't represent us. I made a whole video about that one before. But the idea is that people aren't actually really, our legislators aren't necessarily caring about what people are actually wanting. So we know that the laws are written through a corrupt system. I'm reminded right now of the aphorism or quote about those who enjoy sausages or laws should neither watch either of them being made. It's not a pretty process. So we don't really necessarily trust the process by which we're making the rights. The other thing about rights is that they're drawing a line in the sand and they're creating winners and losers. And that line that is being drawn about what's okay and what's not okay, or what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, first of all, it's always changeable, but it's also never going to be actually nuanced or detailed enough. And anyone who's actually taken a case to court, small claims court, or the Supreme Court, knows that eventually the lawyer is going to, or the judge is going to be making a decision, and someone's going to lose and someone's going to win. And it's not always really clear how that's going to work. And the reason why that doesn't work very well is because we're complex human beings. We have a lot of different things going on. And also, we're not actually going to get to the laws that can be effective enough to sustain us long into the future, because first of all, they can always change. And second of all, the issues we're dealing with are too complex to just be written down into a piece of paper. This is why we use an interest-based approach. Now, interest-based conflict resolution takes the idea that diversity is an advantage, that we actually need different people's perspectives. Those things are going to be helpful for us. And it also really is trying to make sure that we actually really are addressing what is actually important to the people who are involved in the situation. And so there's this, Ken Cloke has kind of 3 interest-based definitions of politics. So if we looked at politics through an interest-based lens, how might we understand this whole political process that we're in? So one of them is thinking about politics is actually a social problem-solving process. We know that there's a diversity of perspectives and viewpoints, and there's various ways of addressing the problem. And so using an interest-based approach reminds us that if we can use all these different perspectives, we're going to solve problems in a better way. So our political process is the way of getting different voices together to solve problems in the most sustainable and effective ways. We can also think about politics as a large group decision-making process. As a country, we're trying to make decisions for 300 and something million people. And the more that we can have consensus and the more way we can include everyone in the process, we can have a stronger democracy. Now, our representative system right now is not actually helping us have consensus or helping us include all of our voices, but remembering that the whole point of our political process is how do we make decisions? And so that's like a really important thing to remember. And we want there to be consensus, though, because if we have more people agreeing on it and the decisions that we're making, then they're going to be more effective. More people are going to be on board. The third definition of politics that comes from an interest-based perspective is to think about politics as a conflict resolution process. In a certain way, this entire political system and democratic structure that we have is basically just a way of resolving conflict. The writers of the Constitution very clear that, oh, shoot, we're going to have to make decisions and we're going to have conflicts about this because we're going to disagree. And that's natural. So there's all these tools and structures to make sure that we can actually resolve conflicts without going to war with each other or fighting or retreating back to that power-based thing. We really want to make sure is that our process is to address the complex issues can actually make sure that it's egalitarian and that no one's going to actually have to win or lose, because when it comes to our political process, we all win or we all lose. And I think that's something really important for us to remember. So how do we understand our current political conflict right now? What is going on? What's the situation we're in? Again, Kenneth Cloke. And I'll provide links about where you can find some of this information. But Ken Cloke and I have written a piece about the sources of political and social conflict, which you can find in the conflict literacy framework of the DPACE initiative. Again, links will be below. So how do we assess conflict? So in order for us to be able to start making good decisions and just apply some of this interest-based thinking and effective decision-making, to make good decisions, we need three things. We need to have high-quality content, in the sense we need to know what it is that we're talking about, and we need to make sure that we have shared information, that good data, what are we trying to solve, how are we trying to solve it. Let's make sure that we're very clear about what we're talking about and what variables we're measuring and what is our goal. Just a hint here, if you're stuck in a conflict, if you can figure out what it is that you're trying to achieve in a way that both people agree, you're more than halfway to your solution. It's an important first step. Okay, we also need high quality relationships. We need people that can actually trust each other, that can respect each other, engage with each other, and be able to listen and respect one another. So we need respectful relationships. And then the third thing we need to make good high quality decisions is a high quality process. And a high quality process is one that is going to create win-win outcomes. It's a process that can integrate all the information that people have and all the different perspectives and help create outcomes that are mutually agreeable or that people can be okay with and live with. Now, this might sound like fantasy again, but we do have the processes for having these kinds of conversations. So if we take that kind of assessment of our current situation, what's the situation we're facing? Agreement about content is a challenge. As we're learning about our social media and fake media and fake news and and everyone's accusing each other of not having the right information, biased information. So one, we're not really clear right now as a culture about what is the information we need to be using. We also have some struggles right now about what is even the question we're trying to answer. Oftentimes you can have two people in a conflict and they're talking about really two totally different things. And also, because of the depth of polarization that's happening right now, there are a lot of broken relationships. That trust, respect, mutual consideration are missing quite a bit. And then, of course, if we look at our processes, our entire political and democratic process is based on a win-lose thing. We are not anywhere close to starting to have a conversation about how do we have win-win outcomes. So I'm going to talk a bit more about process in a bit, but I want to touch a little bit on why are we having such a hard time with our relationships and getting even clearer about our content. Now, one is that we are in something that I and some others have called the political industrial complex, which is actually based on keeping us divided and is benefiting from keeping us divided. And that's something I'm going to talk about in a whole new video or a set of videos coming up in the near future. But the other piece is about ideology. Now, right now, we're kind of in a big culture war. Peter Lindbergh calls this culture war 2.0 and was identifying that we are dividing ourselves into all sorts of different tribes that have a certain ideology and leaders, and we have our own models for thinking about things. We have our specific values, and we have different goals that we're all trying to achieve. And Peter Lindbergh and combined with Connor Barnes call this memetic tribes. Memetic is kind of, other than memes, which we know of as an internet thing, there's the idea of memes as being a seed of culture, a seed of thought, or a belief system. And so we're divided into these different tribes that believe in all these different things. Now, these different tribes, first of all, are all fighting for their cause. They are fighting to the death. They really feel threatened, but they're also super optimistic because most of them feel very confident that they've figured out the answer to the issue and it's going to be this or that. Just to give you some examples of some of the memetic tribes that Peter Lindbergh and Connor Barnes have identified, there's social justice activists and Black Lives Matter and democratic socialists. There's also like the Tea Party, QAnon, evangelical Christians. And just to not pretend like this is something else, I would say that I'm part of a memetic tribe of mediators and conflict resolution practitioners or conflict transformation practitioners. And we have our own models and leaders and belief that we have an answer to all the problems. In my own defense, I would say that, or our defense, that the reason why our solution to the problems is better is because it's a solution to how we solve the problems. But I digress a little bit there. So we have all these different memetic tribes. We're in a culture war. Everyone's fighting to the death to make sure that their goals and ideology are brought forward. And these are rooted in deep values and deep ideology. And so I also want to point out some work by a friend and colleague of mine, Ryan Nakata. He is the creator of the Meta Ideological Politics podcast, and he's going to be a future guest on the Omni-Win Project podcast. And he has an article that I'll, again, give you some links for, called Why It's Impossible to Abandon Ideology and What to Do Instead. And he has kind of 4 reasons why we can't actually get past ideology. So first of all, ideology is something that's structuring what it is that we can see. It also tells us what we can't see. Ryan points out that if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If the only tool you have is a hammer, then everything you look at looks like a nail. But if you don't have a hammer, then you can't figure out what to do with a nail. The point is that our ideology is helping us think about what is what's important and what's not important. And so we're going to have certain things that are in our blind spots and other things that we can see. So the other thing is that ideology helps us think about what is a problem. Like it gives us the idea, this is what problem or that's not the problem. Every ideology is going to identify a different problem. And guess what? All of the problems are problems. But this person's looking at this one and this person's looking at this one. We can all see different things. And that's actually something important. It also helps us recognize what we think are our solutions to the problem. And so even if we agree on what the problem is, ideology is going to help us see different ways of resolving it. And again, we going to need a diversity of perspectives in order to solve problems in sustainable ways. And if multiple approaches or solutions are going to be really helpful. And it's also ideologies helps us know what are the value trade-offs, like kind of what's most important and what's least important. So all of these things that are in ideology are things that we need to take into consideration. And so Peter Lindbergh then has going on when he's talking about the Memetic tribes, he talks about the idea of Memetic mediation. And he actually calls this the hard problem of Culture War 2.0. And there's an article about that I'll point out to you. I found this to be very interesting personally. He's basically saying that we need to have people with the skills that can help people mediate across these ideological divides, because combining these different ideas, we need the different people who can see different things, see different problems, see different solutions. And if we can bring that together using an interest-based mediation, then we can find ways to find solutions that are mutually agreeable to each other. So I totally agree with the call for memetic mediation. And I want to point out that there are a lot of great mediators out there, and just alone in the DPACE initiative, which is called Democracy, Politics, and Conflict Engagement Initiative. We might change our name. It's a little busy there. But in the DPACE initiative, we have hundreds of mediators that are super excited to help out with this kind of mediation, and we have the tools. So I want to also kind of give a recommendation here. Rebel Wisdom brought together Peter Lindbergh, who's making the call for memetic mediation and is the one who's talked about memetic tribes, with Diane Musho Hamilton, who is a Zen Buddhist practitioner as well as a mediator. And they had this wonderful conversation that's called Making Mediation Sexy. And again, I'll put a link here as well. And it's actually part of a whole mediation series that Rebel Wisdom has done. And they have a really great conversation trying to think about it. How do we do this ideological mediation in a context where, and talking about that with a mediator. And together they come up with a couple things that I found to be interesting. One is that there's something, we know that conflict is exciting. There's something that's very engaging with it. It gets our blood up. We kind of want to go towards it. And I think, first of all, just the conflict is exciting. It's energizing. But that unity, the idea of coming together and collaborating, is something that is satisfying. There's something that's very comforting about that. And there's something about taking our differences and figuring out where we can find that sameness and that unity that actually can be really satisfying. And there's something about the importance of lifting that up. Another take home from Making Mediation Sexy that I found to be interesting is there's a way that we might actually help teach people how to fight better. And this is something that I've thought about a lot as well, that once you understand the nature of conflict, which is fundamental to understanding the nature of conflict transformation, we can actually learn how to be more high quality fighters in our conflicts. And I think that that's something that would be worthwhile to pay attention to. And I think that's something that can be a contribution from the world of mediation, conflict resolution, and dialogue and facilitation, is to help people be more skillful about saying what they need to say, but then also listening to the other side and making sure that they're having arguments about the highest quality or the highest caliber elements of an issue. And they talk about how, you know, just like someone who becomes like a very skilled fighter, they don't get into fights as much because they know that they could really destroy the other person. There's a certain way that if we can learn and teach people how to fight better, then they might actually fight less. I'm always about paradox, so I'm into it. I strongly believe that we need to bring more mediators and conflict resolution and conflict transformation practitioners and conflict system designers and dialogue facilitators into our political discussions. I think it's fundamentally important and is one of the huge goals of the Omni-Win project. This is inspired a bit, again, by Kenneth Cloke's book, Politics, Dialogue, and the Evolution of Democracy. And it talks about here how to discuss race, abortion, immigration, gun control, climate change, and same-sex marriage, and other hot topics. So Ken doesn't really shy away there, but this book, a lot of the things I've mentioned here are kind of coming from this book and other books that Ken has written. But one of the things he talks about is some assumptions that we have in the world of mediation that might be really useful to apply in our political conflicts. So one of the assumptions that we have in mediation is that you can't actually disprove people's beliefs. Every belief that people bring, the ideology that they're bringing, holds some grain of truth. And they're also, in certain ways, not factual. Sometimes the feelings and the strong feelings we have about political issues go beyond facts. But that actually is valuable because the feelings get us down back to those interests and the needs. Another thing that mediation is like an assumption and a fundamental principle is that everyone's view is important, it is legitimate, and holds some part of the truth. So what would it look like for us to talk about super difficult issues, race, guns, same-sex marriage, all these different issues? And what would it look like to take some of the tools from the world of dialogue and mediation and include them in our political system? So here's a great list here that I'm just going to give a couple examples of. So first of all, one principle that we can use applying these interest-based thinking to our political process is making sure that we include people who have different ideas. We need people to include everyone, especially those that don't agree with each other. Basic conflict resolution. The next thing is we want to make sure that we're creating a container, an atmosphere, a context that is based on respect and collaboration and holds everyone there regardless of what their opinions are. And a lot of where that comes from is the use of a great skilled mediator or facilitator. This is someone who can really help create that container and make sure that it's maintained. Part of the way that they do that is they create shared ground rules and values and establish those and make sure that everyone is agreeing that these are the rules we're going to abide by, this is the structure we're going to use, these are our goals, these are the values that are going to guide our decision making. Another strategy that comes from the world of mediation and dialogue is focusing on the problem as an it, not the problem as you. Getting everyone to realize that if they're in conflict, they're in relationship, and that the thing that they're in conflict about is not each other, but the issue that they all care about is extremely important. So taking the problem and turning the problem into an object instead of it being the other person being the problem. I think about this sometimes as going from face to face to standing shoulder to shoulder and looking in the same direction. Some of the other tools that get used that can be really useful in our political debates is bringing up questions that don't have a single correct answer. Now, there are questions that we can ask people that have many correct answers. An example that Ken uses is I can go into a room of people and I can say, who is the tallest person here? And there's going to be one correct answer to that. Then I can also then ask everyone in the room, how tall are you? And everyone's going to say a certain height. And there's going to be, therefore, many correct answers, but only one correct answer for each person. And then a third question we can ask, and this is an interest-based kind of question, is what is your experience of being your height? And that is something that touches something deep. everyone's answer many correct answers to it, but also we're actually learning something that's valuable and figuring out what are some of those hidden underlying needs and interests behind each person. Another strategy that we can use in our political conflicts that I think could be super helpful is if you have a large group of people needing to have a conversation, break them into smaller groups. I picture like the town hall where everyone's just like yelling, or there's 100 people and everyone's going to the microphone one at a time. You take that group of 100 people, you break it into 20 groups of 5 or 10 groups of 10 and have them have the conversation. And then people can actually really hear each other and some really powerful things can happen. Another thing we can do is making sure that everyone is taking responsibility for the process. It's not just a process that is being given to someone, but everyone can have shared responsibility. And one way to do that is when things start going sideways, if the conversation's not working anymore, you can stop and then you can ask, what's not working here? Is this working for you? It's a great question to ask people. Is this conversation working for you? And then having a conversation about how we can improve that conversation. What that does is it gives everyone buy-in on how they can improve that conversation and taking responsibility for the conversation instead of just being like, I don't even know, I don't like that kind of thing. And then another one of the questions is, again, there's so much about asking great questions, and actually make sure to provide a link for that one for you as well. Trying to find a question that actually draws people in. So finding the question that will get the people who disagree with each other to be like, I want to be part of this conversation. And it's really powerful to think about that. And the reason why this is so effective is because it accomplishes that thing I said at the top, which is being clear about what the goal of the mediation is, or what we're trying to talk about is getting you halfway there. And if you can ask a question that makes everyone say they want to participate in it, is really powerful. And I'll just say, because we're talking about this from the beginning, that is not a yes or no question, and it is not an up or down vote. Instead, it's an open-ended question that people want to engage with. Another thing that is important is that, like, you need to then remember that this is going to be an ongoing conversation. And so even as you've gone through the process, you've had a hard conversation, you can ask everyone, like, okay, what can we do now to help this conversation be easier next time? How can we improve our communications and keep on improving this in the future? And then actually asking, when do we want to come back together and continue this conversation? So those are some aspects of mediation and dialogue that I think we can use in our political process. And this video is kind of kicking off a whole series. And so coming up in the future, I'm going to be talking about, like, what is actually going on in our political system and why are we trying to have these win-lose conversations, and what are the forces that are trying to promote that. So I'm going to talk about the political industrial complex. Then I'm going to talk about some really great philosophical, scientific frameworks that can help us navigate polarization and complexity and help us get out of the drive to try to find simple answers. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about, like, how as individuals do we engage with a world that is complex and challenging and without finding final solutions to our problems. So all of this is part of the Omni-Win project. I'm going to be launching a new podcast where I'm going to be talking with various folks, some of the ones I've already mentioned here today, and we're going to be talking to them about what they see about the future of democracy. And I'm going to be doing this long into the future because I'm dedicated to helping accelerate the co-creation of the future of our democracy. So please stay tuned. You subscribe to this wherever you found it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you want to get regular updates, I encourage you to check out omniwin.substack.com, and you can subscribe there and you'll get a written and video version of all the different pieces of content that I'm making going forward, and it'll be the first place you can find out about the podcast. So again, thank you for watching and have a wonderful day. And thank you for being willing and interested in helping co-create the future of our democracy. Thank you.